and never give up.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Storytime, here in the vault with me, G-Star. As always, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss any channel content in the future. Some of you may remember that the very first story time on this channel was entitled Men in Black. It's had a very popular reaction with you guys. So because of that, I thought I'd bring you another story that involves the Men in Black. However, this is the very first documented and recorded case of the Men in Black, and this is where the phenomenon began. This is the story of Men in Black, the beginning. A resident of Bridgeport, Connecticut, Albert Bender, had a fascination with strange and unearthly phenomena that actually predated the Kenneth Arnold affair of June 1947 and the Roswell incident in New Mexico by approximately a year and a half, and that ultimately spiraled downward into a full-blown, unhealthy obsession. The phenomenon that started Bender on his paranormal path occurred on December the 5th, 1945, when a squadron of Avenger-class aircraft vanished under circumstances that still provoke controversy to this day. After taking to the skies from the Naval Air Station at Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the disappearance of this Flight 19, as well as the Mariner flying boat that then went in search of the ill-fated planes and their 9 crew members, has today become near legendary and is now an integral part of the lore of the so-called Bermuda Triangle. A far more down-to-earth theory suggests that the pilots of Flight 19 simply got lost, became catastrophically disorientated in the process, ran out of fuel, and ditched in the Atlantic, which became their final resting place. Whatever the truth of the matter, the story immediately caught the attention of the 23-year-old Albert Bender. Using this case as a starting point, he began to dig deeply into the collective works of one of the most renowned chroniclers of all things weird and paranormal, Charles Fort, after whom the equally renowned magazine 14 Times takes its name. By the time of Kenneth Arnold's sighting in the summer of 1947, Bender was living in one of the several modified sections on the top floor of an old 3-story house with only his stepfather for company. As his fascination with flying saucers began to grow, Bender spent more and more time locked inside the upper room, an offshoot of the attic, in other words, where he carefully pursued paranormal books, journals, and newspaper clippings, and made good use of the newly acquired telescope on nearly a nightly basis, excitedly scanning the heavens for anything saucer-shaped. Over the years, Albert Bender hooked up with like-minded devotees of the space people, and he embarked upon the first tentative steps of an ambitious project, namely to establish a worldwide network of UFO investigators to be called the International Flying Saucer Bureau, IFSB, which ultimately came to fruition in April 1952 and led Bender to publish his very own magazine, Space Review. IFSB did not only blossom and bloom, it also caught the attention of flying saucer disciples all across the planet. UFO reports poured into the IFSB. People eagerly fought to become members of the group, and Bender spent night after night faithfully answering letters of the cosmic sort that reached him by the sackful. Everything seemed to be going well. A solid network of saucer devotees had been created. The IFSB appointed representatives in a number of countries, including Britain and Australia, and in no time at all, Bender's little group became a fairly significant force on the UFO research scene. However, in one of those classic live fast, die young scenarios, the IFSB, the James Dean of ufology, perhaps, was not destined to last long. It was stark fear rather than the pompous, ego-driven bureaucracy that blights so many UFO research groups that brought the IFSB to a grinding halt. The beginning of the end began on the night of July 30th, 1952, only a few months after the IFSB was established, when an anonymous telephone call was made to Bender's residence. With his stepfather not around, Albert was the one fate destined to answer it. When he picked up the phone, no one spoke, but Bender was instinctively certain that someone was at the other end of the line, listening intently in eerie silence. Then all of a sudden, Bender became very dizzy, and his head throbbed alarmingly, and he was forced to retire to his bed. A few days later, fully recovered, Bender went along to his local movie theatre. A new science fiction flick was due to be screened, and he was eagerly awaiting its appearance. The movie proved to be uneventful, but the walk home shortly before the arrival of the witching hour was most definitely not uneventful. As he negotiated the dark sidewalks, an increasingly concerned Bender was sure that some hostile figure was pursuing him. He made it home without incident, however, and as his stepfather was already sleeping, he made his quiet and careful way to the attic. On approaching the door, a fearful Bender could not fail to see that an eerie glow emanated from the thin gap directly beneath the doorframe. He flung open the door and was confronted by a strong smell of burning sulfur and a bright, shimmering object hovering in the room. Suddenly, Bender's eyes felt severely irritated, at which point he turned on the light and the strange object vanished into oblivion. With his OCD no doubt kicking in big time, Bender could see that certain IFSB files were not quite where they should be. Someone or something had been rifling through his precious flying saucer material. Bender tried valiantly to put his unsettled experience behind him and focused on other matters, such as the day-to-day activities of the IFSB. A few months later, on returning back to the local movie theatre on a dark night in November 1952, Bender was happily watching the latest science fiction release when he was overwhelmed by a strange and unsettling feeling. It was a mixture of dread and trepidation, and a sense of being intently stared at from the darkened recesses of the old cinema. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Bender was horrified to see a human-like form materialize in a nearby seat. A well-dressed man in dark clothes had seemingly appeared out of nowhere. The shadowy figure could hardly be considered a local. However, for one thing, his eyes glowed like flashlight bulbs. Bender was once again afflicted by sudden dizziness. His head swirled, and he was forced to close his eyes as he sought to lessen the nausea that quickly threatened to engulf him. When he eventually opened his eyes, a relieved Bender could see that the spectral being had vanished. He tried in vain to focus his attention on the movie again, but it was all to no avail. Minutes later, he had yet another distinctive and uneasy feeling of being watched by unknown forces. Bender slowly and apprehensively turned around. There, yet again, was a glowing-eyed, well-dressed fiend of the night, staring coldly and harshly at Bender, who wasted no time at all in leaving the cinema and making his way back home as quickly as possible. Throughout the next few months, Bender's dizziness spells continued. Brief manifestations of dark-suited entities plagued his days and nights. Alarming outbreaks of poltergeist activity occurred in his attic. Brimstone-like odours proliferated, sometimes for days, and he began to develop intense migraine-like headaches. It was at the height of this mental and physical torment, midway through 1953, that three men, dressed in dark clothes, treated Bender to the worst of all of his varied visitations. According to the initial story that quickly made the rounds in flying saucer research circles, the trio of mysterious characters revealed to the panic-stricken Bender the dark truth behind the UFO presence in our world, but warned him, in hushed but stern tones, never to reveal what he had been told under any circumstances whatsoever. That is, unless Bender had some sadistic wish to incur their immediate and deadly wrath, which he most certainly did not. In fact, so terrified was Bender by the whole experience that in October 1953 he announced to his shocked followers in the pages of his Space Review magazine that he was closing the doors on the IFSB and leaving the flying saucer arena for good. Bender's own words on this matter, published in the final issue of the magazine, only added to the controversy. We would like to print the full story in Space Review, but because of the nature of the information, we are sorry that we are being advised in the negative. We advise those engaged in saucer work to please be very cautious. Bender, October 1953. And for Bender, that was that. The legend of the Men in Black and their attendant threats was duly born, and they had successfully claimed their first victim. After dissolving the IFSB in 1953, Albert Bender went on to marry, but in the rest of his life he never publicly talked about ufology or continued public research on the matter. Albert lived to the ripe old age of 94 and died as recent as March 29th, 2016 in Los Angeles, California. So do you think Albert had a real encounter? Or was he just another one of these crazy crackpots just looking for attention? Let me know in comments what you think. We hope you've enjoyed this story time and can join us next time here in the vault for more mysterious and thought-provoking stories. Until then, keep safe, stay in the light. Good night.